Hello, my name is Julie, and today I'm going to be giving you sci-fi fantasy recs by female authors. So I am a speculative fiction forward person. I love a sci-fi, a fantasy, anything that is not entirely realistic fiction, I eat up. It's the majority of what I read. And right now, fantasy romance is on the rise. It's the big darling of right now. And I think a little bit of what I'm seeing is a conflation of a female author in the fantasy sphere with writing only fantasy romance, and a conflation of male authors writing quote-unquote serious sci-fi and fantasy, which I think is BS. How much or how little romance you have in a book does not determine how worthy the book is. However, I'm a person who does stick to more fantasy titles, and I think it is a little bit more of a male-dominated center, if not in how many authors are getting published, definitely in how many authors are given roses for their work. Like when people are telling you about fantasy books that they really love, they're probably going to name 7 white men and then maybe throw in Robin Hobb and think that they're doing a good job. They're not. So I have a bunch of female authors. I have at least one gender non-conforming author, lots of different ethnicities, and several queer authors in here that I wanted to share with you. So if you're looking for some fantasy romance recommendations, this is not the place. Fantasy romance girlies, I see you. You are valid. You're not who we're talking about today. And I would like to point out almost all of these books that I'm talking about today do have at least a little bit of romance in it. It's something that's in most books, period. But they are not a central focus of the book. And that is how I like my romance to stay. So I am not going to be talking about some of the most popular authors right now because I want to give you some recommendations that you might not have read. And all of these books that I'm going to be talking about are considered adult books. So I'm going to start off with some series that I think you should read. Some of them are completed, some of them are not. And then I'm going to do a bunch of standalones. But the first one I want to talk about is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, and that is The Final Strife by Sarah L. Arifi. This is the first book in the Ending Fire trilogy, which is inspired by African and Arabian mythology. Generations ago, these boats came to this island after the entire world burned down. There were 3 types of people. There were the red-blooded people, the blue-blooded people, and the clear-blooded people. The red-blooded people have all of the magic. The blue-blooded people don't have magic. They are working class, mostly poor. And the clear-blooded people, a couple of generations ago, launched a rebellion because they were so poorly treated and are now essentially a slave class. And we follow one girl from each of those blood classes, but mostly we're following Scylla, a blue-blooded contingent kidnapped a bunch of red-blooded babies and replaced them with blue-blooded babies. Scylla is one of those red-blooded babies who has now been raised by the blue-blooded people to try to take down this rigid class structure. Every 20 years, there is a competition who is going to be the ruler, and that competition is coming up, and Scylla was supposed to compete, but she is not prepared at all. She has fallen into addiction, and her life is going to be kind of turned upside down when she starts going more into what is happening at this competition. I think that this is such a good fantasy book. I think that this made the competition format feel interesting again to me because I've seen it done a lot of times. It does a really good job talking about imperialism, oppressive class structure, and how bodies in power are able to maintain their power. It does actually talk about those strategies. Meanwhile, it had characters that I actually cared about. It's been so hard for me lately to find characters that I feel so passionately about, like I did when I was reading young adult fiction, and I was so rooting for all of these characters to work together. While they do have the same end goal, they do not have the same background to understand each other in all of their actions, and seeing them start to work together was one of the best parts about this book. I just thought this had a good balance of plot, the pacing was great, the characters I cared about. The only complaint I had was a little bit of the world building at the beginning was clunky, and that was it. So this is the first in a trilogy. It has been finished, and the sequels do have good reviews. I have only read book 1, but I am so excited to continue on. Speaking of competitions, I have another book like that. I just finished this. This is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is a 2025 debut fantasy novel. This is about an empire that worships 8 different animals called guardians who are protecting humanity, but it is said that once they come back an 8th time, they will destroy humanity. Much like in The Final final strife. We have an emperor stepping down and a competition where one person is being submitted to compete by each of the different groups worshiping the guardians. And our main character, Nima, is a scholar of the ravens. A murder ends up taking place at the beginning of the competition, and she is going to have to try to solve what happened. And how that ties into a failed coup that took place 16 years before that also had Nima compromising her values. This is the highest rated fantasy book that is not a sequel, that has come out in 2025 so far. Right now, it has a 4.49 on Goodreads. And everybody that I've seen talk about it has said this is fantastic. And I do think this is a very promising start to a series. This has a large scale. It has a unique narrative style. Our main characters are complicated. You don't always agree with what they're doing. I think that this gives me a larger scale feel than a lot of the fantasy that I've been reading lately. It's very long, and I even could have had it gone on for longer with all of the plot that's going on, all of the world building stuff that we're getting. This is twisty. I wasn't able to predict everything that was going on, and it just made me excited to continue reading. So maybe you should get on the bandwagon before this becomes mega popular. Then I have two finished duologies that I only own the second book of, but I'll talk about A Memory Called Empire first. This is the second book, A Desolation Called Peace. This is the Tixkalan duology, where our main character Mahit is a diplomat for the small space station she grew up on to this much larger empire. She has been trained from a very, very young age on their culture. Her people have actually created this secret technology that at a job, your replacement is given a chip of your memories implanted into their mind until you become one consciousness. So collective memory is never lost about how to do one's job properly. But when Mahit's predecessor is killed unexpectedly and did not have the ability to back up his memory, so Mahit is given an outdated memory card to go and try to figure out why her predecessor was killed. The first book in the series in particular is very high-paced, high-stake. The first book is a chase for survival, trying to make sure she and her friends aren't killed while trying to investigate this mystery. And the sequel is a little bit more tense. It's a first contacty type book. This is a series that is about the dangers of imperialism and how it hurts people, while also being massively entertaining. I think this is one of the most approachable series on the subject. It's only 2 books. It's very engaging and has a lot of good lessons to teach. And the other one is the Radiant Emperor duology, starting with She Who Became the Sun. I have He Who Drowned the World here by Shelley Parker Chan, who identifies as genderqueer. This series is inspired by the founding of the Ming Dynasty. Our main character grew up in a very poor family. A fortune teller came by and told her family her brother would be destined for greatness and she would be destined for nothingness. Then when a drought comes through, all of her family is killed except for her. She ends up taking her brother's name and going to the monastery where he was promised a place and begging to be let in. She ends up being absolutely cutthroat in her dedication and grabs for power. And there is also a eunuch general who works for an opposing side who we are following, seeing the two of them who both have complicated relationships to gender, trying to grab power for themselves and are ultimately going to be opposed to each other. This is such an accomplishment. I cannot wait for Shelley Parker Chan to write more, because this, off the bat, being your first published work, incredible. This is a darker, more violent fantasy, at least on a large scale. I think if you're a fan of the Poppy War, this series is a must read. It feels very similar in the way that it's talking about like large scale movements, particularly in the second book. In the first book, we are mostly following Zhu personally, and in the second book, it does sort of blow up into a larger cast of characters who are all doing terrible things in the name of power. The first book is sort of a rise to power, and the second book is a fall from grace for so many of these characters. There are characters that you definitely root for, but there's no good guys here. This talks about the horrors of war. It talks about trauma. One of the main magical aspects of this book is that there is a character who is constantly seeing ghosts. And I will say, while this is considered fantasy, this is light on those magical elements. And overall, this book series will just leave you with a heavy feeling feeling of just experienced so much. I said it before, this is just a massive accomplishment, and I cannot wait for more news from this author. And the last series I'm going to talk about is the Magic of the Lost series, beginning with The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This is a trilogy. The third book has just been announced very recently that it is going to be coming out this year, which is great. We've had a long time in between books, and I have only read book 1 because I was holding off on book 2 until book 3 came out, so now I need to get a move on. But this is a fantasy series that is inspired by France's colonization of northern Africa. We have the Khazal region, which is under the control of the Baladarian Empire, and our main character is Terrain, and she was born in Khazal, and she was taken from a young age to be raised in the Baladarian Empire and be a soldier, and she is very good at this. And for the first time, she is actually returning to Khazal. She is going to be patrolling the place where she was born. And when she gets there, she is unjustly court-martialed and brought to the woman who is in charge of this outpost of the empire. This is Luca, who is actually the heir to the throne of the empire. And Luca, in order to prove that she's capable, especially because she is disabled and a woman and generally not kindly looked upon despite her competence, she wants somebody on the inside to help her quell the rebellions that are happening in Khazal. So she makes a deal with Terrain to help her. But when Terrain actually is interacting with the people of Khazal, she is realizing how much was taken away from her when she was separated from her homeland, and how poorly the people of Khazal are being treated. It's not that they're being disobedient, it's that they are being mistreated. And that, of course, is an understatement. Yet another book that is talking about imperialism, and this one being inspired by very real-life countries. I think the journey of our main character a little bit reminded me of Robin from Babel by R.F. Kuang, just in the awakening of like, I was taken away from something in order to be a tool. And I do believe, as you would guess from the title of the series, Magic of the Lost, that we are just scratching the surface on the magic as Terrain is finding out more about the magic that is inherent to her homeland. I'm back, my mic died. Having only read the first book of Unbroken, but definitely wanting to continue, I do think that this is a series that a lot of fans of other popular series will really like. Now I'm going to move on to our standalones. A lot of these are going to be smaller scale, a lot of them are going to be set on Earth. First off, I'm going to talk about Kaikeyi, which I read earlier this year. This is a mythology retelling from the Ramayana. Kaikeyi is one of the mothers of Rama in the Ramayana. In the Ramayana, Rama is a new avatar of the god Vishnu and is trying to cleanse the world of different jinn or jinn-like creatures. I don't remember exactly the language that's used in this. And Kaikeyi is one of his mothers, technically his stepmother. And when he is about to come into power, she ends up exiling him to these forests so that he cannot take what is supposed to be his throne. And this book is questioning why that happened. It is told from Kaikeyi's perspective. The author talks about how this book came about because she overheard a discussion between her mother and her grandmother who were disagreeing over whether Kaikeyi was doing the right thing. This is about a woman who starts as a girl growing up in a place that doesn't value girls, still finds a way to succeed, gets married into a place where women can be more respected, and taking that and running with it and finding more places for girls and women. Finding that even though she has created a community that is forward thinking in that way, that still there are going to be people who are going to push back on that and who are trying to influence her sons to go back to more quote unquote traditional values. This is about a woman whose son is essentially getting red-pilled, desperately trying to help him be the man that she knows he can be. Kaikeyi has a magic that I have never seen in books before, where she can actually see the connections between people. Specifically, it's mostly dealing with the connections between her and another person, but she can see them manifested as different types of like cord or thread. And she often is using those connections with people to influence how she's dealing with them. And I just think that this was a really interesting character study and introduced me to a story I didn't know very well in a way that connected with me very much. Speaking of mythology, let's talk about Natalie Haynes and 1,000 Ships. It is a retelling of lots of different portions of the Odyssey and the Iliad and just generally the Trojan War. I am a huge Greek myth nerd. Over the course of my life, I have seen a lot of ways the Greek myths have been told, and this one stood out as one that really impressed me. So almost every single chapter is narrated from a different point of view, and every single one of those point of views is from a woman. Usually these stories aren't told from women, and this sounds complicated, but I think it flows really well. The book is told in 2 timelines. We start at the end of the Trojan War, and half of our perspectives continue to move forward, and those are told in chronological order, telling all of the repercussions that happen after the Trojan War is over. All the stuff from the Iliad, talking about during the Trojan War and the forces that led up to the Trojan War, are told from the end of the Trojan War told backwards. All of the different characters here were characterized so vividly, and telling the story in this specific way, where it's weaving the effects and the causes together, was absolutely brilliant and just gave me a whole new love for these old stories that I have been reading all of my life. A standalone sci-fi that I do not talk about enough is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is one of my favorite sci-fis ever. One of the twistiest books I have ever read, and just an absolute blast. This does have a companion novel to it as well. I don't think it's necessary to read that. The Space Between Worlds is 100% a finished novel, like you don't need to read any more, but if you do want to see more from this world, you can read the companion, which I don't think you should read on its own. This world has discovered parallel universes. A person can only travel between worlds if their double in the other world is dead. And our main character, who is from these dusty slums outside of this rich, walled, technologically advanced city, has the unique bargaining power of being the person with the fewest surviving doubles. She is able to travel to places where nobody else is, and that causes some tension because the people from this walled city do not like people like her. She ends up going to a new world and finding out that one of her doubles has been murdered, and she is going to have to figure it out. This book advances from the synopsis pretty quickly, and I just think it does a fantastic job of being a very propulsive sci-fi story where we're constantly running around and trying to do different things while also having great commentary. There's just so much commentary that comes along with our main character being from this place that is so looked down upon with people who look just like her and having to work in a place that looks down on people like her. It does so much with so few pages, and I really, really got a lot out of it. Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki is actually a combination of sci-fi and fantasy. Decades ago, a violin virtuoso made a deal with the devil that she would have to bring in 7 students into being a perfect violinist, and she has successfully turned in 6 students' souls to hell. And she has been looking for a very long time for the 7th, and her time is running up before she is going to get sucked to hell herself. She ends up finding this young trans woman who is unpracticed in violin but has so much character about her playing that she ends up taking her in and treating her very kindly after Katrina, the young woman, has been through so much hatred and shame been put upon her by her family and her supposed friends. Saitomi, the teacher, is giving her a welcoming home. Katrina, because she has been so abused in the past, she knows that there's another shoe about to drop and is accepting of all the things she's getting, but knows she's going to have to pay a price sometime. Meanwhile, there are also space aliens who are running a local donut shop, and yeah, that has to do with the plot. It's very strange. Devils, but we also have aliens, and we have strange technology going on that just feels like magic. So it is just a nice blend of a lot of things. It has the right amount of seriousness seriousness and talking about sad realities while also being ultimately hopeful and uplifting as Katrina is finally finding some people to consider her home. I think that this is a book if you're looking for a found family type story that isn't too far away from reality but has the little sprinkling of speculative in it. This is one that I would 100% recommend. Now, a series by this author is very popular and has been talked about for years, but one that I don't actually see that many people talking about is The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden. This is another magical realism type book that is set during World War I. Our main character Laura was a Canadian nurse during World War I and was sent home. And her brother Freddie was a soldier on the front and he ends up going MIA. So Laura decides that she needs to go back to the war front to try to find him. And we do follow Freddie as well. He ends up getting trapped in a hole with an enemy soldier, and the two of them bond trying to survive and get out of it. And Freddie ends up getting swept away into a magical force that is trying to keep him away from reality. This is a historical magical realism where the magic is a huge metaphor for what was going on at the time. I think the amount in there is just right. It is more grounded in reality than a lot of these other books that I've talked about. I love the emotions of these siblings as they are trying to get back to each other. I think that that is what the beating heart is of this book, even though there are relationships that are going on. It's very atmospheric, the writing is fantastic, and it's also about a period of history that is a little bit more overlooked for its more popular younger sibling. I think this has a lot of important things to say about the effects of war, and it definitely left an impact on me. Next up, I have The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova. It is very much in that Latin American tradition of magical realism. If you liked the movie Encanto and would like a definitely adult book that gives you the same feelings of it, that is talking about like intergenerational trauma, it has pretty similar magics that are popping up that feel sort of random but very symbolistic of what is going on the page in reality. This is 100% for you. The center of this book is the matriarch of the Montoya family, Orquídea. She has invited everyone to come back to her house in Ecuador because she says she's going to die. They are going to have a funeral for her while she is still alive. She has not left her house since her whole family has left the house, most of them to go to America, and there seems to be some sort of magic that is left behind by Orquídea. So we are following all of the grandchildren of Orquídea as they start to have little magics manifest around them, and as a dark magical force starts wanting to take the family down because of something that happened in Orquídea's past, and we also do get to see that past. Fantastical is a word that I would use to describe it. The language is so lush, and honestly, when the book's starting and everybody's coming to this house, all of the descriptors of the magical things that are going on, at first I thought they were metaphors, and then they kept going on, and I'm like, oh, no, this is happening on the page. This is actually what's happening. It's not just stylistic. It just has that classic style. I have since read Gabriela Garcia Marquez, and I'm like, oh, no, I see where this is coming from. I totally see where it's being pulled. If you're someone who loves an intergenerational story like me, I think that this is one you cannot go wrong with. So if you're looking for something that has a very magical feel to it of like unexplained wonder, while it also still has adult topics and themes, this is what I would pick. If you're looking for a story that feels like it is a brand new fairy tale, I would point you to a brand new release, and that is The River Has Roots by Amal El-Motar. This is a novella, which normally does not work for me, but I thought that this was the absolute perfect length. It is about two sisters who grow up on the edge of fairy, and they have the task of singing to the magical trees that are at the edge of fairy. These two sisters love each other very much. They are absolutely dedicated to each other, and everything in their lives is about to change when there are forces that are wanting to control the sisters. I don't want to be too specific because, again, this is pretty short of a book. The magic is called grammar, and it's tied into language. This is not fae so far as a big buff person who just happens to have superpowers but looks exactly like a human. This is fae in the trickster tradition and doesn't look quite right, isn't entirely human. And it really doesn't have have that much of the Fae involved in the book. It's more that edge of, oh, there's another world right next door that, like, do you want to peek in there or not, is sort of the magical setting around this. If you're an audiobook listener, I would absolutely recommend you listen to this one specifically. There is singing and different rhymes that happen in this book that are acted out. There's a little bit of sound effects occasionally. And the narrative of the book is very much trying to play into the idea of you being read a story or told a story by someone. It's having a relationship with you as the reader. Keeping it to that oral tradition is most in line with what this book is meant to be as an experience. I don't normally like novellas, and this one absolutely blew me away. And it has that right amount of bittersweetness to it that a good fairy tale has. And the last book that I'm going to be talking about today is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. Now, I've read several books by T. Kingfisher. This is the one that I kind of want to push people to read because I don't feel like people are reading it. But this one is taking the story of the Goose Girl and ripping different parts of it and completely changing them around so that they mean something different. But if you know the story of the Goose Girl, when it's laid out like that, you can point to it and say, okay, this is where this came from, and then it was turned dark. This is a dark fantasy that is set in a lightly Regency-inspired world, but it is dark, it is bleak, it feels a lot more gothic than what Austen would have intended. And our main character is a teenage girl who has been completely controlled by her mother. And it's not just the control that a parent would normally have over a child, not letting them do this or that. Her mother is actually secretly a sorceress and literally controls her daughter's body regularly. It's very claustrophobic, and our main character just wants to get away from her mother. But her mother has other plans. She knows that she is going to need to make a good match for her daughter, so in order to do that, she needs to get some power for herself. She finds a suitor that she thinks she can seduce, and the two of them go over to stay at his estate. But the sister of this suitor feels like something is up and is trying to figure out how to help this girl. This is a dark fantasy for sure. It 100% has horror elements. And the fantasy element of this is in that fairy tale-like feeling of, oh, this person has magic. And there are normal people who are trying to combat that. It's not a very, strict magic system or anything. And again, it's being used as a metaphor for parental abuse. And I think that T. Kingfisher does such a good job showing the terrible things that the main character has been through and helping build her out of that. Finally finding people who understand her and will love her for who she is, and the difficulties with pulling her away from her parental guardian. I think that this is a book that has a lot of catharsis to it and emotional payoff while it is taking place in a fairly unique setting and has a tone that you might not see in other places. But yeah, those are all the books that I wanted to talk about today. They are all fantastic sci-fi fantasy titles that I hope some of them will be entirely new to you and you can find some new books to really enjoy. I wanted to dedicate some time to shouting out some women and some trans umbrella authors who are doing great things in the fantasy genre. Let me know if you have any recommendations for me of books that fit into this category, books that maybe aren't getting enough attention. And if you'd like to get some more recommendations from me in the future, why not subscribe? I make videos every single week. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.